The recorded military history of Puerto Rico encompasses the period from the 16th century, when Spanish conquistadors battled native Taínos in the rebellion of 1511, to the present employment of Puerto Ricans in the United States Armed Forces in the military campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq. Puerto Rico was part of the Spanish Empire for 4 centuries, when the Puerto Ricans defended themselves against invasions from the British, French, and Dutch. They fought alongside General Bernardo de Gálvez during the American Revolutionary War in the battles of Baton Rouge, Mobile, Pensacola and St. Louis. During the mid-19th century, Puerto Ricans residing in the United States fought in the American Civil War. The quest for Latin American independence from Spain spread to Puerto Rico, in the short-lived revolution known as the Grito de la Razón, culminating with the Intentona de Yoko. The island was invaded by the United States during the Spanish-American War. After the war ended, Spain officially ceded the island to the United States under the terms established in the Treaty of Paris of 1898. Puerto Rico became a United States territory and the Puerto Rico Regiment was established on the island. Upon the outbreak of World War I, the U.S. Congress approved the Jones-Shafroth Act, which extended United States citizenship with limitations upon Puerto Ricans and made them eligible for the military draft. As citizens of the United States, Puerto Ricans have participated in every major United States military engagement from World War I onward. During World War II, Puerto Ricans participated in the Pacific and Atlantic theaters, not only as combatants, but also as commanders. It was during this conflict that Puerto Rican nurses were allowed to participate as members of the WAACs. The members of Puerto Rico's 65th Infantry Regiment distinguished themselves in combat during the Korean War and were honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. During the Vietnam War, 5 Puerto Ricans were awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military honor in the United States. Presently, Puerto Ricans continue to serve in the military of the United States. The following is brief history of the military events in which Puerto Ricans have participated. Taíno Rebellion of 1511. Christopher Columbus arrived in the island of Puerto Rico on November 19, 1493. During his second voyage to the so-called New World, the island was inhabited by the Arawak group of indigenous peoples known as Taínos, who called the island Borican or Borinquen. The Taínos were known as a peaceful people, however they were also warriors and often fought against the Caribs, who in more than one occasion attempt to invade the island. Columbus named the island San Juan Bautista in honor of St. John the Baptist. The main port was named Puerto Rico. The conquistador Juan Ponce De Leon accompanied Columbus on this trip. When Ponce De Leon arrived in Puerto Rico, he was well received by the Cacique Agüebana, chieftain of the island Taíno tribes. Besides the conquistadors, some of the first colonists were farmers and miners in search of gold. In 1508, Ponce De Leon became the first appointed governor of Puerto Rico, founding the first settlement of Capara between the modern-day cities of Bayamón and San Juan. After being named governor, De Leon and the conquistadors forced the Taínos to work in the mines and to build fortifications. Many Taínos died as a result of cruel treatment during the labor. In 1510, upon Agüebana's death, his brother Guibana, better known as Agüebana II, and a group of Taínos led Diego Salcedo, a Spaniard, to a river and drowned him, proving to his people that the white men were not gods. Upon realizing this, Agüebana II led his people in the Taíno Rebellion of 1511, the first rebellion in the island against the better-armed Spanish forces. Garanex, Cacique of Utuado, attacked the village of Sotomayor and killed 80 of its inhabitants. Cacique Garanex died during the attack, which was considered a Taíno victory. After the Taíno victory, the colonists formed a citizens' militia to defend themselves against the attacks. Juan Ponce de Leon and one of his top commanders, Diego de Salazar, led the Spaniards in a series of offensives which included a massacre of the Taíno forces in the domain of Aguebana II. The Spanish offensive culminated in the Battle of Yagacas against Cacique Mabido Mocha. Aguebana II was shot and killed, ending the first recorded military action in Puerto Rico. After the failed rebellion, the Taínos were forced to give up the customs and traditions by order of a royal decree, approved by King Ferdinand II, which required that they adopt and practice the values, religion and language of the conquerors. According to the 500th Florida Discovery Council Round Table on March 3, 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon organized and commenced an expedition departing from Punta Aguada, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was the historic first gateway to the discovery of Florida, which opened the doors to the advanced settlement of the USA. They introduced Christianity, cattle, horses, sheep, the Spanish language and more to the land that later became the United States of America, 107 years before the Pilgrims landed. Europeans fight over Puerto Rico. 16th century Puerto Rico was considered the key to the Antilles by the Spanish because of its location as a way station and port for Spanish vessels. In 1540, with revenue from Mexican mines, the Spanish settlers began the construction of Fort San Felipe del Morro in San Juan. With the completion of the initial phase of the construction in 1589, El Morro became the island's main military fortification, guarded by professional soldiers. The rest of Puerto Rico, which had been reorganized in 1580 as a captaincy general, had to rely on only a handful of soldiers and the local volunteer militia to defend the island against militant and pirate attacks. The main enemies of Spain at the time were the English and the Dutch. They, however, were not the only enemies that Spain faced in the Caribbean during this period. On October 11, 1528, the French sacked and burned the settlement of San German during an attempt to capture the island, destroying many of the island's first settlements, including Guanaga, Sotomayor, Dagua and Loiza, before the local militia forced them to retreat. The only settlement that remained was San Juan. In 1585, war broke out between England and Spain. The Anglo-Spanish War was not limited to Europe, extending to Spanish and English territories in the Americas. In November 1595, Sir Francis Drake, the Vice-Admiral in command of the Royal Navy fleet that tackled the Spanish Armada, and Sir John Hawkins attempted an unsuccessful invasion of San Juan. Both Hawkins and Drake died of illness in the course of the campaign. On June 15, 1598, the English fleet, led by George Clifford, landed in Santos and held the island for several months. He was forced to abandon the island upon an outbreak of bacillary dysentery among his troops. In 1599, 400 additional soldiers and 46 cannons were sent to the island along with a new governor, Alonso de Mercado, to rebuild the city. 17th century, the Netherlands was a world military and commercial power by 1625, competing in the Caribbean with the English. The Dutch wanted to establish a military stronghold in the area and dispatched Captain Boudewijn Hendricks to capture Puerto Rico. On September 24, 1625, Enrico arrived at the coast of San Juan with 17 ships and 2,000 men. Enrico sent a message to the governor of Puerto Rico, Juan de Harros, ordering him to surrender the island. De Harros refused. He was an experienced military man and expected an attack in the section known as Boquerón. He therefore had that area fortified. However, the Dutch took another route and landed in La Puntilla. Laro realized that an invasion was inevitable and ordered Captain Juan de Mezquita and 300 men to defend the island from El Morro Castle and then had the city of San Juan evacuated. He also had former Governor Juan de Vargas organize an armed resistance in the interior of the island. On September 25, Enrico attacked San Juan, besieging El Morro Castle and La Fortaleza. He invaded the capital city and set up his headquarters in La Fortaleza. The Dutch were counterattacked by the civilian militia on land and by the cannons of the Spanish troops in El Morro Castle. The land battle left 60 Dutch soldiers dead and Enrico with the sword wound to his neck which he received from the hands of a Mezquita. The Dutch ships at sea were boarded by Puerto Ricans, who defeated those aboard. After a long battle, the Spanish soldiers and volunteers of the city's militia were able to defend the city from the attack and save the island from an invasion. On October 21, Enrico set La Fortaleza and the city ablaze. Captains Mezquita and Andre Botello decided to put a stop to the destruction and led 200 men in an attack against the enemy's front and rear guard. They drove Enrico and his men from the trenches and into the ocean in the haste to reach the ships. Enrico, upon his retreat, left behind him one of his largest ships, stranded, and over 400 dead. He then tried to invade the island by attacking the town of Aguada. He was again defeated by the local militia and abandoned the idea of invading Puerto Rico. In 1693, the militias urbanas de Puerto Rico were organized in almost every town. Every native male, ages 16 to 60, was obliged to serve in these companies, unless he had an official exemption on account of physical disability or family hardship. While Spain and England were in a power struggle in the New World, Puerto Rican privateering of English ships was encouraged by the Spanish crown. Captain Miguel Enriquez and Captain Roberto Cofresi were two of the most famous. In the first half of the 18th century, Enriquez, a shoemaker by occupation, decided to try his luck as a privateer. He showed great valor in intercepting English merchant ships and other ships dedicated to contraband that were infesting the seas of Puerto Rico and the Atlantic Ocean in general. Enriquez organized an expeditionary force which fought and defeated the English in the island of Vieques. He was received as a national hero when he returned the island of Vieques to the Spanish Empire and to the governorship of Puerto Rico. In recognition of his service, the Spanish crown awarded Enriquez the Medalla de Oro de la Real Effigie, named him Captain of the Season War, and gave him a letter of marque and reprisal, thus granting him the privileges of privateer. 18th century armed conflicts with the British. The English continued their attacks against Spanish colonies in the Caribbean, taking minor islands including Vieques east of Puerto Rico. On August 5, 1702, the city of Arecibo on Puerto Rico's northern coast was invaded by the British, armed only with spears and machetes, under the command of Captain Antonio de los Reyes Correa. 30 militia members defended the city from the English, who were armed with muskets and swords. The British were defeated, suffering 22 losses on land and 8 at sea. Reyes Correa was declared a national hero and was awarded the Medalla de Oro de la Real Effigie and the title of Captain of Infantry by King Philip V. Native-born Puerto Rican had petitioned the Spanish crown to serve in the regular Spanish army, resulting in the 1741 organization of the Regimiento Fijo de Puerto Rico. The Fijo served in the defense of Puerto Rico and other Spanish overseas possessions, performing in battles in Santo Domingo, other islands in the Caribbean and South America, most notably in Venezuela. However, Puerto Rican complaints that the Fijo was being used to suppress the revolution in Venezuela caused the crown to to bring the Fija home, and in 1815 it was mustered out of service. In 1765, the Spanish crown sent Field Marshal Alejandro O'Reilly to Puerto Rico to form an organized militia. O'Reilly, known as the "father of the Puerto Rican militia," oversaw training to bring fame and glory to the militia in future military engagements. Nicknaming the civilian militia the "disciplined militia," O'Reilly was later appointed governor of Colonial, Louisiana in 1769 and became known as Bloody O'Reilly. The American Revolutionary War. During the American Revolutionary War, Spain lent the rebelling colonists the use of its ports in Puerto Rico, through which flowed financial aid and arms for the cause. An incident occurred in the coast of Mayagüez in 1777 between two Continental Navy ships, the Udenwook and the Henry, and a Royal Navy warship, HMS Glasgow. Both American ships were chased by the larger and more powerful Glasgow. The American colonial ships were close to the coast of Mayagüez. Members of the Puerto Rican militia of that town, realizing that something was wrong, signaled for the ships to dock at the town's bay. After the ships docked, the crews of both ships got off and some Mayagüezanos boarded and raised the Spanish flag on both ships. The commander of the Glasgow became aware of the situation and asked the island's governor, José de Fresnay, to turn over the ships. De Fresnay refused and ordered the British warship out of the Puerto Rican dock. The governor of Louisiana, Bernardo de Gálvez, was named Field Marshal of the Spanish colonial army in North America. In 1779, Gálvez and his troops, composed of Puerto Ricans and people from other Spanish colonies, distracted the British from the revolution by capturing Pensacola, the capital of the British colony of West Florida, and the cities of Baton Rouge, St. Louis and Mobile. The Puerto Rican troops, under the leadership of Brigadier General Ramon de Castro, helped defeat the British and Indian army of 2,500 soldiers and British warships in Pensacola. Gálvez and his multinational army also provided the Continental Army with guns, cloth, gunpowder and medicine shipped from Cuba up the Mississippi River. General Ramon de Castro, who was Gálvez's aide-de-camp in the Mobile and Pensacola campaigns, became the appointed governor of Puerto Rico in 1795. Sir Ralph Abercrombie attacks Puerto Rico on February 17, 1797. The governor of Puerto Rico, Brigadier General Ramon de Castro, received news that Great Britain had invaded the island of Trinidad. Believing that Puerto Rico would be the next British objective, he decided to put the local militia on alert and to prepare the island's forts against any military action. On April 17, 1797, British ships under the command of Sir Ralph Abercrombie approached the coastal town of Loiza, to the east of San Juan. On April 18, British soldiers and German mercenaries landed on Loiza's beach. Under the command of de Castro, British ships were shot at by artillery from both El Morro and the San Geronimo fortresses, but were beyond reach. After the invaders disembarked, practically all fighting was land-based, with many skirmishes, field artillery and mortar fire exchanges between the San Geronimo and San Antonio Bridge Fortress and British emplacements in Condado to the east, and El Olimpo Hill in Miramar to the south. The British tried to take the San Antonio, a key passage to the San Juan islet, and repeatedly bombarded the nearby San Geronimo to the tune of nearly 1,000 shells and almost demolishing it. At the Martin Pena Bridge, they were met by the likes of Sergeants Jose and Francisco Diaz and Colonel Rafael Conti, who together with Lieutenant Lucas de Fuentes attacked the enemy with 2 cannons. After fiercely fighting by the Spanish forces and local militia, they were defeated in all attempts to advance into San Juan. The invasion failed because Puerto Rican volunteers and Spanish troops fought back and defended the island in in a manner described by a British lieutenant as of astonishing bravery. Laro Godiva, Folklore. The defensive San Juan served as the base from the legend of Laro Godiva. According to the popular Puerto Rican legend, on the night of April 30, 1797, the townswomen, led by a bishop, formed a Godiva and marched throughout the streets of the city singing hymns and carrying torches, while at the same time praying for the deliverance of the city. Outside the walls, the invaders mistook the torch-lit movement for the arrival of Spanish reinforcements. When morning came, the enemy was gone from the island and the city was saved from a possible invasion. 4 statues, sculptured by Lindsay Dane in the Plazuela de la Godiva in Old San Juan, pay tribute to the bishop and townswomen who participated in La Godiva. Attack of Aguadilla. The British also attacked Aguadilla and Punta Salinas. They were defeated by Colonel Conti and the members of the militia in Aguadilla, and the British troops that had landed on the island were taken prisoner. The British retreated on April 30 to the ships and on May 2 set sail northward. Because of the defeat given to the British forces, Governor Ramon de Castro petitioned Spanish King Charles IV for recognition for the victors. He was promoted to Field Marshal and several others were promoted and given pay raises. The British persisted in invading Puerto Rico after Abercrombie's defeat, with unsuccessful skirmishes on the coastal towns of Aguadilla, Ponce, Cabo Rojo, and Mayaguez. This continued to occur until 1802 when the war finally came to an end. 19th century, France had threatened to invade the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo. In 1808, the Spanish crown sent the navy, under the command of Puerto Rican Captain Ramon Pau y Giral, to prevent the invasion of Santo Domingo by the French by enforcing a blockade. Colonel Rafael Conti organized a military expedition with the intention of defending the Dominican Republic. They were successful and were proclaimed as heroes by the Spanish government. American Civil War. During the 1800s, commerce existed between the ports of the eastern coast of the United States and Puerto Rico. Ship records show that many Puerto Ricans traveled on ships that sailed to and from the U.S. and Puerto Rico. Many of them settled in places such as New York, Connecticut and Massachusetts. Upon the outbreak of the American Civil War, many Puerto Ricans joined the ranks of the United States military armed forces. However, since Puerto Ricans were Spanish subjects, they were inscribed as Spaniards. The 1860 census of New Haven, Connecticut, shows there were 10 Puerto Ricans living there. Among of them was Augusto Rodriguez, who joined the 15th Connecticut Regiment in 1862. During the Civil War, Rodriguez, who reached the rank of lieutenant, served in the defenses of Washington, D.C. He also led his men in the battles of Fredericksburg and Wise Fork. The regiment was mustered out on June 27, 1865, and he was discharged in New Haven on July 12, 1865. Slave Revolts. Up until 1873, when slavery was abolished in Puerto Rico, the wealth amassed by many landowners in Puerto Rico derived mainly from the exploitation of slaves, but slavery generated its antithesis: disobedience, uprisings and flights. In Puerto Rico there were many minor slave revolts in which the slaves clashed with the military establishment. In July 1821, Marcos Ciaro, a Bozal slave, planned and organized a conspiracy against the slave masters and the colonial government of Puerto Rico. According to his plot, which was to be carried out on July 27 during the festival celebrations for Santiago, several slaves were to escape from various plantations in Bayamon, which included the haciendas of Angus McBean, C. Courtnight, Miguel Andino and Fernando Fernando Fernandez. They were then to proceed to the sugarcane fields of Miguel Vigueras, and retrieve cutlasses and swords which were hidden in those fields. Zorro, together with a slave from the McBean plantation named Mario and another slave named Narciso, would lead the slaves of Bayamon and Toa Baja and capture the city of Bayamon. They would then burn the city and kill those who were not black. After this, they would all unite with slaves from the adjoining towns of Rio Piedras, Guaynabo and Palo Seco. With this critical mass of slaves, all armed and emboldened from a series of quick victories, they would then invade the capital city of San Juan, where they would declare Zorro as the king. Unfortunately for the slave conspirators, the plot was divulged by a fellow slave to the authorities. The mayor of Bayamon mobilized 500 soldiers. The ringleaders and followers of the conspiracy were captured immediately. A total of 61 slaves were imprisoned in Bayamon and San Juan. The ringleaders were executed and the fate of Zorro remains a mystery. There were other minor revolts up until the abolition of slavery in the island became official.